Hey there, welcome back to our kitchen. Today I'm going to be pressure canning some of the venison that we just harvested here on our homestead a couple days ago. This is my first time canning deer meat, so it's going to be a learning experience for both of us, but looking at the recipe, it looks exactly like canning anything else. Put it in the jar, put it in the canner, and wait the time, and that's it. So I've chosen to can a lot of our deer this time around. I want to see how tender and how flavorful the meat is by doing it this way. A lot of times deer meat can be a little bit tough and chewy, especially if you do like a quick cooking process. You really need to do like a slow cook, maybe in your crock pot or in the oven or something along those lines. Because the meat is so lean and doesn't have a lot of fat, it tends to get really hard and chewy and rubbery really quickly. So I'm gonna try it in the canner and see if coming out of the jar, if it's more tender. I'm hoping that it kind of has like a stew meat consistency whenever I pull it out, so that I can toss it in like frying pan and mix it up for maybe like tacos or nachos or some other kind of way that you would normally eat, like shredded beef or something like that. Let's try it out and see how it turns out. All right, so first step, we are going to take our jars. I'm gonna use quart jars because I figure that probably whenever we're eating this, we're gonna need enough for the three of us for a meal. So we'll put them in quart jars. So I'm gonna start by just giving these a good hot rinse. These have already been through the dishwasher, so they've been sanitized and everything like that, but I just wanna get any dust or anything that might have settled inside of them out really quick. And then we're gonna move over and pack them with our deer meat. Alright, so we have our jars all ready to go. I'm going to be using a funnel to try to just keep the rim of the jar clean, so I'm not squishing meat on top of the rim or anything like that. I have my deer pieces. They are cut into like 1 to 2 inch chunks. They're not very uniform or anything like that. We have removed most of the silver skin and the tendons and chewy bits like that. I wasn't too super detailed with like little intricacies and stuff like that because I know that the pressure cooking is really going to tenderize it a lot. So if there was like one little sliver of something, I didn't mess with that too much. But I'm hoping that I have maybe 7 quarts because my canner will hold 7 quarts, and I just love having a full canner, and obviously the more we can get at one time, the better. I'm gonna be doing a raw pack recipe today for this. I kind of got a general consensus on the internet to see how most people would can their venison, and it seems like that's kind of the way to go. I'm going to be following the recipe out of my Presto canner booklet here, and it's just straightforward. It just says to fill the jars with raw meat, leaving 1 inch of headspace, not adding liquid, removing air bubbles, and then sealing them up and putting them in the canner, bringing it up to 11 pounds of pressure for 90 minutes for quart jars. So that's what we're gonna do. Okay, so we got 7 full quarts here, and there is still probably 2 more quarts left, so that's great. What I'm going to do now is just go through with my little tool here and just go down the sides of the jar and make sure that there aren't any air bubbles that are in there. That way we're getting the most use out of the space that's in our jars. And you can see that I left 1 inch of headspace in these jars. A good rule of thumb for just eyeballing it, you can use like a tool here that will show you how much headspace you have in there. But really, like, the bottom rim of your jar is 1 inch, and then there's a line that goes around the middle that's about 1/2 inch, and so you can kind of eyeball it from there. I'm gonna add half a teaspoon of good quality salt to each jar here. You don't have to add salt. It doesn't help with the preservation process. It's more of a flavor thing with this one. But I feel like whenever you cook meat with salt, the flavor gets into it a little bit better versus pre-cooked meat and adding salt on top. So I'm just adding my half teaspoon there. So my jars are packed good and tight, and I have removed all the air bubbles the best that I can and have left 1 inch of headspace. And now I'm just gonna go with a clean rag, has a little bit of water on it, just to wipe these rims to make sure that there's nothing that got onto our rims that will prevent our lids from sealing. Right, next I'm going to add my new clean lids here. I did give them a rinse off as well, and I'm just gonna kind of dry them off real good and stick them onto my jars. All right, now that our lids are on, we're gonna add our rings. Just tighten them to finger tight. So we're not cranking them on, just enough to where your fingertips can't open or close it is all that we're going for here. All right, so now we are ready to start loading up our canner. As always, be sure that you have some kind of protection at the bottom of your canner. Typically, they will come with something that helps keep your jar off of the bottom of the canner. This just helps prevent that heat from getting too hot on your jars and causing them to crack or bust. Because after all of this hard work, losing jars inside of there during the cooking process would be very sad. Each canner has a certain amount of water that it needs present while it is pressure cooking. Mine requires 3 quarts of water. Be sure to check your manual to see what your canner requires, but for mine, I'm gonna add 3 quarts of water. And now we are ready to add our quarts of deer meat. Isn't it pretty? Now we'll go ahead and add our lid on. All right, and then we turn on some heat and let this thing start warming up. What we're going to be looking for is our steam vent to start steaming rapidly, and we want that steam to be continuous. So not just sputtering or anything like that, but a continuous stream of steam for 10 minutes straight. And then once we have hit 10 minutes, we're going to add our weight on top of it, and then it'll be time to start watching the dial and watching our pressure. Now you can see that our steam is going a good solid stream there, and it has been going this way for about 10 minutes. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my weight and sit it right on top, wearing a glove because that is hot steam. And as soon as you put that on there, you'll see your pressure valve should pop up at the back. All right, so now that our pressure valve has lifted, we have our weight on. Now our gauge is going to start climbing. We want our pressure to get up to 11. So once we get up in that range, we're going to start monitoring the heat. We might need to turn it down just a little bit, turn it up just a little bit to try and keep it in the 11-pound mark. All right, so now the canner has reached 11 pounds of pressure. I'm going to let it go just a little bit above, maybe like 13 or so. And then I'm going to back off my heat just a little bit. And I'm gonna have to do this a time or two until it gets to 11 and is holding there. So right in the very beginning, you might have to kind of pass 11, come back just a little bit, but don't let it fall under 11. But as soon as you hit that 11 pounds of pressure mark, you can go ahead and start your timer. So for quarts, it's 90 minutes, and for pints, it is 75 minutes, I'm pretty sure, but check with your manual to be sure. So we are holding 11 pounds of pressure consistently, and it took about 20 minutes for it to get to where it's holding that. Your canner might take a little bit less, a little bit longer, it just depends, but now it is holding at 11 and I don't have to mess with the temperature at all. So we're gonna let this ride out the rest of the time, and once our timer goes off, then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so once our 90 minutes has completed, we cut the heat off to our pot and we let this pressure come down all the way on its own. We're not gonna touch anything or pull anything off. We're gonna let this pressure come down naturally by itself. Even if your pressure gauge reads 0, that pressure is completely out of it. It's not done getting rid of pressure until your pressure plug has fallen. So this might read 0, your pressure plug might still be up. Wait until that pressure plug falls, and once that falls, then you can move on to this next step, which is removing the weight. So use a glove because there could be some trapped steam that's under it. So now that it's fallen, we're going to remove our weight here. This is gonna open up that steam vent here. And now we're gonna set another timer for 10 minutes to let it completely get all of the steam out. And what we're doing is we're slowly bringing that pressure down, and that's gonna help our jars come to temperature a little bit better, because if you take all this stuff off and immediately take your jars out, you do chance them busting because of temperature shock, or you chance the liquid inside of them bubbling over because of the pressure change is just too much. All right, 10 minutes has subsided and we have let this just sit and be still, and now it is time for the next phase. I do apologize if you hear the humming in the background. We got the bits of jerky going in the dehydrator, so sorry for that noise if you can hear it. You will need your oven mitts to protect your hands for this next step. I'm gonna try something different this time than what I usually do. Typically, most canning recipes tell you once you have vented for 10 minutes to just go ahead and take the lid off all the way. I have noticed that the pressure change has caused a little bit of siphoning in my jars, so meaning that the liquid has tended to bubble out a little bit. So my sister-in-law told me to just go ahead and undo the lid and just leave it like it is. So this is letting just that last remaining pressure come out of there. And I'm gonna see if this makes any difference for me or not. So I'm gonna leave it like this for about 5-10 minutes, just with the lid still on. It's just cracked now. And then after 5 or 10 minutes, I will take the lid off and remove my jars and see if maybe this extra step helps with keeping some of that liquid inside the jars. Alrighty, so we vented our lid and we waited a little bit to take this lid off and see what we have inside. Do you guys like my glove? Every time I wear this in videos, I'm so embarrassed. Robert actually wore this when he was grilling and one of the flames got to it, so it's a little crusty, but hey, it still works, right? Anyways, we are ready to take this lid off. We're going to lift it away from our face so that any steam that's still in there is not coming up into our face. Set our lid to the side. All right, these look pretty good. I'm gonna grab my tool to pick them out. If you guys are interested in any of the canning tools that I'm using, I'll put a link in the description box below for this exact kit. It's relatively cheap and I use basically all of the pieces from it every time I can. So check it out if you're interested. We're already popping. So now I'm just going to grab the jars by the glass itself, not by the rings, and very carefully lift up and over to my resting place. Now you're gonna want a place that these jars can sit for at least 12 hours undisturbed. So don't put them right in the way of what you're gonna be doing. Put them somewhere that they can rest and fully come to room temperature. We are leaving at least an inch in between each of these jars so that there's plenty of room for them to cool properly. If they're too close, they'll hold some heat and it could cause them to take a long time to cool down. I'm being very careful not to tilt these jars at all because the liquid could prevent the lid from sealing correctly, because some of these are still not sealed yet. You'll hear the lid start popping whenever they do form a seal. So doing the trick with the lid halfway on, halfway off at the very last minute, I'm not sure if that's what helped with the siphoning, or maybe I just got it better this time, I don't know. But I didn't have any siphoning in the water, which is really exciting. And these jars look really good. I'm really proud of them. Besides the hard water mineral ring that's around the jars, which is just something that happens when you have water that has lots of minerals in it, you can prevent this ring on your jars by putting a little bit of white vinegar inside of your canner before you start it, but it doesn't bother me that bad. What I'll do is once these are room temperature and ready to go on the pantry shelf, I'll just take a wet rag and just wipe them off to make them look pretty. But the hard water line doesn't affect the meat or the canning in any sort of way. All right, so that's it. That was a really simple and easy recipe, and I hope that maybe if this is your first time canning deer, that it's as easy and simple for you too. If you do follow this recipe, let me know in the description box below. Let me know what you think about it. If you have a better way of canning deer, please let me know that as well in the comments. I do appreciate you tuning in and watching this video. I look forward to seeing you on the next one, and until then, see you later.